stop hating on me.
Alright guys, so if you can't tell by the smile on my face, got my car back. It's been 2 years and we had to do it right, so we brought it 7 hours from home to ASM. The man Andy here to get a K24 swapped into it, and it is a completely different car. I'm super stoked to get it back on track and kind of relearn how to drive the car with a little more torque now. All right, first fill up with the 85. She corn fed now.
Because code is awesome!
Don't look at that or that or that or the fact that there's two of us and only one seat. Don't worry about that. So this is my 2001 Honda S2000, which is now K-swapped by ASM. So we know that no corners were cut. Everything was done pretty much by the best of the best. If you're new to the channel, my name is Dash. As you can see by the vehicle in the background, as well as this, as well as the other vehicles that you cannot see in the video, we do vinyl wraps. So being able to do that myself, with only the cost of materials being the only thing that I need to worry about, this car has gone through a lot of different versions. I wrapped it a satin ghost slip pearl, and then I modified that wrap a little bit after messing around with Need for Speed. And then I did a split wrap, and then I did the stealth camo, which I think will be my all-time favorite as far as the looks of the vehicle. After that was the wrap that it is currently, which is the Vinyl Frog Gray Purple. Very creative name, I know. So the reason why this car is K-swap now is because of the video right now. Now, unfortunately, with racing, stuff like that does happen. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's when. The longer that you race, the more likelihood that something catastrophic like that is going to happen. So, unfortunately, the F20C1 that came in this vehicle from the factory was destroyed. Because I was curious, I pulled the motor, opened it up to see how much damage was actually done, hoping that it was something easily rebuildable. It was a lot worse than I was hoping for. So the only reasonable option is to K-swap it. Through YouTube University, as well as some other life experiences, I believed that I had the skill set to be able to do this other than the tuning and modifying the wire harness. Life is chaotic, things get busy. We're busy still racing. We have our GR86 that we race. And we just got into drifting as well, which we picked up another 2013 FRS to drift. And then, of course, our GR threw an angle kit on that as well. So we were busy doing that, working multiple jobs, running the vinyl wrap shop, traveling around, just living life. So I wasn't gonna have the time to do this myself. I contacted Andy at ASM. I knew that that's where I wanted the car to go, but it was gonna be a pretty hefty price to pay another shop. As you can imagine, the price is fairly high, but I'll go over that here in a second. ASM is located in Wisconsin, and they are about 7 hours away from where we used to live. We are about 4 hours close to them now, but it was about a 7-hour drive to haul the vehicle to them and drop it off. Now, because I was originally going to do the swap myself, I had already started ordering parts and accumulating things that I was gonna need for this. So I had ordered my K24 from H Motors Online. My motor through them with shipping was a little over $1,500. You can save a lot of money by finding a K24 locally. I mean, Honda put them in everything. They are the LS of 4-cylinder engines. but there are a lot of different versions and variants of the K24, and there's only a couple of them that are really worth your time and money, in my opinion. But the K24A or the K24A2 out of the Acura TSX is kind of the king when it comes to the K24 swap. So in this video, I'm just going to be going over the K24 swap itself and everything that I am aware of, at least, that went into getting it to where the car is right now, running, driving, and track ready. Looks factory. To the unanointed, you would think this is just the factory engine. This was originally an Acura TSX. So to keep costs down, as you can see, this is the factory S2000 intake manifold, as well as the factory S2000 header. Now, if you look closely, lighting isn't great, but those have to be cut, two of the runners, and then re-welded, slightly different location than the F-Series, so it's not a direct bolt-on. But ASM offers that. You can give them your factory manifold and they will modify it to fit. Now the intake manifold is a little bit easier. It just requires a spacer to bolt that right up. We're still using the factory fuel rail, fuel pressure regulator. Everything looks OEM, everything looks stock. Nothing extra than what is needed to be reliable, considering that we do race this car and do a lot of autocross days, as well as getting into HPDE with grid life. Now I did not have an intake, so I could either purchase like the K&N or a factory airbox, which will fit on this because we are using the factory intake manifold as well as the factory S2000 throttle body. Regardless of what intake you have, you can use it on a K-swapped engine. So again, another way to keep costs down, I had ASM just weld up an intake for me, and it's nothing pretty, but eventually we'll run maybe a nicer setup. I have zero issues with this. It's a cheap filter. It's just some aluminum pipe welded together. It does the job. It's not going anywhere. They welded in a bracket for bracing there. The other thing that I did not have, or I had but needed to replace, was the radiator. I had a Mishimoto radiator in here. It ballooned out, it expanded. Had them get a new radiator and put that in as well. And this is just a CSF. So any radiator is fine, Mishimoto, CSF, Koyo. They're all gonna basically do the same job. It's basically your opinion on what looks better, what is more reliable, what cools better, so forth. I'm running a Mishimoto fan shroud with their included fans. Now, a lot of people say those aren't good enough, but I've had zero issues. We also live in Minnesota, so the hottest temps we're racing in, ambient temperature is probably like 90, 95, and that's pretty rare. If you live in a much hotter desert climate, then I would definitely recommend beefing up your cooling system because that will be one of your weak links. We are running a Gates belt, a new tensioner, the EP3 idler pulley, and a USDM K24 alternator. Some things that you can't see are some coolant fittings and adapters underneath the intake manifold, as well as on the back side of the engine right there. That way you have the proper routing for all the hoses. Still running the factory S2000 radiator hoses. Those are reused. The engine harness is modified to plug directly into this K24. And you can see all the wiring looks OEM. Nothing looks out of place in here. We have Hasport engine mounts, as well as a Moroso baffled oil pan. And you're not able to see much from down here, but we have the trans adapter plate for the factory F-Series transmission, as well as the Clutchmaster steel flywheel that is needed to run the F20 with the K-Series. And then as far as the clutch, I'm running an OEM disc, brand new, with ACT pressure plate, which is kind of like the standard when it comes to just a good quality clutch that you're gonna have OEM feel, OEM pedal pressure, and it's gonna be reliable. Now, if you're gonna be boosting an S2000 or anything, you're gonna wanna step your clutch up. That is perfect for the power numbers that I'm making right now, which I'll put on the screen right here. So a couple of the things that I did before bringing the car to ASM to have them finish the job. I replaced the fuel pump, which I had already purchased from Science of Speed. It's a Walbro 450, which is a bit overkill for what this vehicle is doing right now, but that was in plans of boosting the car, which was gonna happen the winter that it blew up. So that kind of threw a wrench in those plans, but I had these parts laying around. Since I was gonna be running E85 in this, and E85 requires about 30% more fuel, it would do the job. And if I decide to boost the K-Series, then I already have a pump in there that can handle the extra fuel needed. So I installed that, as well as Science of Speed's wiring kit for an aftermarket fuel pump. It has larger gauge wire, a separate relay and fuse, and you run that directly to the battery and into the tank, and you basically rewire everything so that it can handle the extra draw from the larger fuel pump. Because the factory S2000 wiring for the fuel pump is very small, and you can run into issues where it overheats, melts, potentially catches fire. Last thing you want is an electrical issue near or inside of your gas tank. The other thing that I had that I gave to ASM when I dropped the vehicle off was a flex fuel kit that I also purchased from Science of Speed, because I knew that I was gonna want to run E85, but I drive this car a lot, and I knew that once it was swapped, I was gonna enjoy it even more. And I needed the flexibility that flex fuel offers to be able to fill up with whatever fuel I want, whether it be 91, 93, E85, and the car not skip a beat regardless of what mixture is in it. So the car is flex fuel, but every chance I get, I throw E85 in it. The additional power that offers over just a 91 or 93 tune on a K24 without doing anything internally with the engine. ASM said it makes about 3 horsepower to the wheels more on E85 than on 91. E85 is a more stable fuel. It's much cheaper, even though you do run through a lot more. You want the stability that the fuel and that extra octane offers, especially if you're going to be driving these cars hard and racing. If you're just doing this on a daily driver, then it's not really necessary, and you're not going to notice any benefits other than the initial cost at the pump. Now, ASM has also learned a few tricks with these motors to keep them reliable. They've kind of figured out the weak links and what needs to be changed and addressed. So inside the engine, or at least inside the oil pan, when they installed the Type S oil pump, they use Nordlock washers, which are basically going to help with vibration. K-Series motors are notorious for having a ton of vibration. So you kind of do things to mitigate that as much as possible. And switching to a Type S oil pump, you remove the balance shafts that are in the factory K24 oil pump. A couple little things that they do with the Nordlock washers is to prevent anything inside of the motor from loosening up, backing out, falling off, getting sucked up into the engine, things that you don't want. Now, the things that you should do on a K24 are the crank pulley, replacing the factory one with either the ATI super damper or a fluid damper. Now, there's people that say one is better than the other, but they're both going to do great. They're both going to do the job of reducing vibration in these engines, which again is the biggest downfall of having this in the car. Now, having a K-swapped S2000 or a K-swapped anything, if it's not factory and you're running a Type S oil pump, you're going to need to make it a routine to check over all of the bolts on the car. Every bolt, every important bolt. Anything that is attached to the engine is a good place. So your intake manifold, exhaust, your valve cover, coil packs, all your bolts to your pulleys, alternator, the oil pan bolts. Make sure that your oil filter is tight. It's definitely a just good safety precaution every time you go out to drive. Just reach down. It's literally right there. Just reach down, grab that, make sure it's tight, because those like to back out even on factory S2000 engines. And then check your transmission bolts, your starter bolts, your drivetrain, so the prop shaft, your drive shaft, your rear diff, lug nuts. Make it a point to, even if it's just once a month, just get the car in jack stands, get the car in the air, just check over everything. Other things that you don't think of with most newer vehicles is an ECU. With an AP1 S2000, you can't do anything with the factory ECU. I mean, you can, there are workarounds, but pretty much the thing that you need to do is just save up and get a standalone ECU. I'm running a Haltech Elite 1500 in this car. Those ECUs and just standalone ECUs in general are not cheap. With the 1500, you're looking at about 1,500 bucks. You can go a little bit cheaper, but then you lose out on some of the features, but it'll still do the job. You have companies like Link ECU coming out with a lot of products that are for multiple vehicles, and I'm unaware if they have anything for the S2000 specifically. Chances are they do, and if not, they will soon. And they're gonna be a little bit probably more budget friendly than Haltech. So the ECU is just in its factory location in an S2000. You can see all the wires, which there's usually a cover that goes over this, but because of all the wiring and the much larger ECU, that cover doesn't fit. Now I don't really have any issues with this unless I'm on like a longer drive and I'm trying to use the dead pedal. With larger feet, the wires kind of get in the way. And now that everything is done and we've already bit the bullet and paid the money for everything to do it once, now if I have any engine issues whatsoever, it's another $1,000 for an engine. 1,200 bucks or 1,500 bucks. I'm sure at some point these engines are going to go up in value, but there are so many of them that, like I said, you can still find them for 800 bucks, 1,000 bucks. Just search around. If you're patient, you can find a good deal. If not, order one from any of the importers all across the East Coast, the West Coast, you name it, there are going to be motors available. So total cost is going to be kind of a rough estimate because a lot of parts were ordered a few years ago. Prices have changed, but I'll put together a total cost of roughly about how much this would cost for you to specifically take your vehicle to ASM and have them basically do all the legwork. So you drop off the vehicle, you get your vehicle back, running, driving, tuned, K-swap by the best of the best. It's a lot of money. Now that it's done, the money is out of the account, it was definitely worth it. I absolutely love this car. It was always my dream car, and it's K-swap now. So some could argue that it's even better than how Honda originally made it. Would I recommend K-swapping your S2000? If you have the ability to do it yourself, you're going to save a lot of money. If you still have a running, working, good condition F-Series motor in your car, that's gonna eat up at least a third of the cost of K-swapping it if you're able to sell that. If you're like me and your motor was pretty much shot, the stuff that you were able to salvage off of it just went back into the engine, then you're saving a decent amount of money there too, reusing factory S2000 parts, intake manifold, exhaust manifold, fuel rail, fuel pressure regulator, intake. That's all gonna save you money. Pretty much sky is the limit on how much you wanna spend on building a K-Series and putting it into one of these cars. This is a prime example of doing it as budget friendly as possible with what's going to work and what's going to be reliable. And that's what matters if you're racing. Hope you guys enjoy the video. If you have any questions, drop them down below and I'll make sure to respond to you. Keep an eye out for the next video. We're going to be going over the full build on the S2000, which isn't anything crazy, but it has gone through many changes over the years to get it to where it is right now, and it is going to go through many more changes to get it to where it is my dream build for this car.